Fnatic has gone to MSI before, but at that time I wasn't in the roster.
This is Fnatic at their finest. We are going to Game 5. Fnatic take down SKT.
I would like to show to the fans that I can lead the team as well, just as how Yellowstar did. My goal is definitely top 2, and I would be disappointed otherwise.
I think what's next for me is just to kind of show my strength internationally, which I haven't been able to do in the last few years. I understand there's such a stigma around that. NA teams at Worlds, or like me at Worlds, I really want to break that. I really want to just completely demolish it.
Evos, they take down Supermassive.
Mình muốn là Evox thắng tất cả những vòng bảng và mình muốn bẻ răng hết những mid lane một mảng luôn.
Barely missed out. Oh, they're going to look for the trade. Sorta back in again. Where does Sorta come from?
今年的话 ，MSI 的队伍只有我们闪亮是从去年又再打完，我们队伍每个人的实力，我觉得都是有所提升，所以我这次的话想要让大家看到一个是更稳定，但是实力又更坚强的闪亮。
上一次我去 MSI 的时候是在16年，然后现在隔了2年了，然后这次也想弥补一下当时的遗憾。
제가 이제 프레이 형이랑 오래 했지만 해외 대회에서 우승을 해본 적이 없거든요. 이제 롤드컵 같은 경우에는 준우승이 그때 독일에서 했었고 지금 저희가 MSI 일단 독일에서 시작하잖아요. 그래서 이번에는 정말 좋은 결과를 가지고 싶고 이제 꼭 세계 대회 우승컵이라는 거를 정말 한번 갖고 싶다.
Welcome to Berlin, Germany, and opening day of the 2018 MSI Group Stage. The champions from 6 different regions look to put their names in the history books as we kick things off with RNG taking on the home favorites in Fnatic. Here you see them entering the studio just moments ago. That's right, we're in the EULCS studios. Beautifully put together, and Shox so kindly lending her analyst desk to me for the remainder of the MSI group stages. Of course, Royal Never Give Up as well, here to do the Chinese fans proud. Hello, everyone. I'm James Dash Patterson, joined by Indiana Frosker in black, Andrew Vedius Day, and Joshua Jat Leesman. How are you guys feeling ahead of a 5-day straight group stage here for MSI?
I am extremely excited. We have so many talented teams, a bunch of new ones, and a lot of new stories to build today.
Yeah, MSI group stage might be my favorite group stage. It's so many games for so many teams. Every team plays 10 games. There's always a pretty large amount of upsets, which is always pretty exciting.
I'm actually going to go one further. MSI is actually my favorite tournament. I feel like it's Worlds, but without all of the fat trimmed away, so it's just lean competition of champions.
All right, well, covering the action from around the world, we do have our international broadcast partners here. You see them on your screen. This is just half of them, as we'll flip to the other half in just a moment's time. About 22 different regions being cast around the world to help bring the action to everyone on every corner of the globe. Now, before we look into a closer look at the champions and competitors, let's remind everyone here of the format at MSI 2018. Now, in the group stage, each team will play 10 games, with the top 4 teams advancing to the knockout stage. The semifinal matchups will be determined by the choice of the top seed before our MSI champions are decided on the 20th of May.
Yeah, and a couple things to point out. The current champions of MSI, or SKT, they're not here. They didn't win the LCK. We actually only have one returning team to the MSI group stage from last year, and that's the Flash Wolves. So a lot different this year at MSI.
Yeah, a lot of new teams. We don't have the likes of an SKT, no G2 from Europe, no TSM or CLG from NA, no EDG from China. So very much a new look for this year's MSI.
It's just a new chapter in general for League of Legends esports. Yes, you still have all of these legacy names, but also some familiar or new faces joining the roster, and a new MSI champion will be crowned.
That, of course, brings us to our competitors, starting starting with EVOS Esports from the VCS and Flash Wolves from the LMS, who won the play-in stage after taking down Supermassive and Gambit.
And they did it in quite a dominating way as well. The fact that we had a 3-1 going in favor of EVOS and a 3-0 going in favor of the Flash Wolves. I feel like many analysts kind of expected there to be a little bit more competition from the play-in teams, but these guys came in with pre-prepared strategies and they played perfect.
Yeah, I mean, the play-in group stage was pretty exciting. You saw Supermassive was dominating. You saw Gambit seem to be a little bit back in form, and then nope, they just got slammed by EVOS and Flash Wolves here. So I liked seeing EVOS kind of bringing a little bit of what the Gigabyte Marines did in terms of game pace into it, and two of their players, and I also liked what Flash Wolves did as well.
And fortunately, there was just a lot of pressure. You know, Vietnam getting their spot on the world stage now, having their region behind them. The Flash Wolves also bringing in two new members of the Wolfpack and needing to really cement their legacy that were something without just Karsa.
Well, I think that's the big thing, right? A lot of questions surrounded the Flash Wolves squad and what their identity would be without Karsa. But you have to remember, they still have the likes of Sword Art and Maple.
Yeah, I was expecting a weaker version of Flash Wolves, honestly, without Karsa, because he was such a big part of that team. And that still could be the case, but the fact that they were so convincing in that play-in knockout stage portion with the 3-0 makes me think they're still a threat.
They also only have 2 rookies, right? The fact that they came into their first international stage after their first split, I feel like not only will they have a lot to learn, but a lot of surprises, I imagine, they will bring.
They'll, of course, be joining Kingzone, Dragon X, Royal, Never Give Up, Fnatic, and Team Liquid in the group stage. Let's start by looking at Kingzone from the LCK, a team considered by many to be the favorites going into this tournament.
Yeah, they're 2-time champions of the LCK now, winning the last 2 splits. They were really the favorites going into Worlds last year under the title of Longju, and Praying Gorilla in particular have actually come into a couple of tournaments as Korea's sole representative and not won. So even though there is this expectation that they will win, there is still that pressure of being Korea's lone team to win. Huge favorites, though, based on how they dominate Korea and how Korea is so strong at MSI.
Yeah, and if you guys haven't seen this team before, I mean, the reason why they're favorites is because they're pretty good at League of Legends. Their early game was one of the most dominant in the LCK regular season, and to top it all off, their team fighting is just phenomenal. The individual skill on this roster is just seems unparalleled.
Would expect nothing less from the most dominant team in the most dominant of regions. Moving right along, though, we have the LPL's RNG with their superstar AD carry in Uzi making his first MSI appearance.
And he's not the only superstar on that team. RNG, one of 2 super teams throughout the LPL, and Uzi, after so many second-place finishes, finally got to lift the cup, and that's what you want to see as an LPL fan going into this. Not just an in-form Uzi, but an Uzi with momentum.
Yeah, and I feel Uzi finally playing the way that he's always really wanted to, but sometimes his teammates weren't willing to give to him. I saw Xiaohu, their mid laner, playing Banner of Command, Ardent Sensor, Morgana in the mid lane.
Please no.
And Karma being the highest priority mid laner for them before it became super meta like we've seen in this play. And so everyone on that team is supporting Uzi almost more than they ever have. And guess what? It's the first split Uzi's won in the LPL.
It's working. That's the core of that statement there. We have from the EU LCS, of course, Fnatic coming off a huge win over the 4-time defending champions in G2 Esports.
Yep, the old kings have reclaimed their throne, and after what was a long rebuilding process, after losing Huni and Rainova, they finally managed to find some success. They brought Youngbuck, G2's former coach, onto the roster, along with Hillisang down in the support position, and they just blew away the competition. No other AD could really rival the power that Reckless could bring in the bottom lane.
And for me, I'm frankly most excited to see Fnatic on the international stage. I felt like they were a bit of a rose in the greenhouse, and so I really want to know, like you're saying, can they still walk away with the success they've had built off of Caps and Reckless, or will they simply not be able to just frankly outclass their opponents and slow them down?
Now, finally, we have Team Liquid from the North American LCS. Tons of experience on this roster, Jad.
Yeah, a team of veterans, new team for them, and they actually had a pretty shaky regular season going 12-8, including tiebreakers, but it was in the playoffs where they really found their form, Doublelift in particular. And now the question will be whether they can take that playoff momentum onto the international stage and carry through, or if some of their struggles from the middle of the regular season come back against this different competition here at MSI.
It's easy to forget the struggles of that regular season when you look at the 9-1 record and the way they kind of dominated the North American playoffs.
One of the big things for me is how well prepared Team Liquid tend to be when coming into things like playoffs. I feel like that their regular season performance to their playoffs was just so different that my expectations are actually quite high for this roster, and I'm looking forward to having them have a strong start.
Of course, we have a stacked AD carry pool in the group stage with some famous names like Uzi, Reckless, Doublelift, and Prey. So let's go ahead and run through these guys, starting with Team Liquid's Doublelift, who's still looking to find success on the international stage.
Yeah, and I really want him to have a good international tournament
we all?
because this guy is unquestionably a legend in North America, winning with 3 different organizations, but making it out of groups would be huge for him. It's something he just hasn't done on the international stage, so a big moment for him to really prove himself once again.
And ultimately, I feel like Doublelift's legacy, at least domestically, has been cemented. He is unquestionably one of the greatest players that North America has ever put out.
We say that, but every time he fails internationally, sure enough, the comments come back, is Doublelift ever good? It's just easy over there, but it needs to happen internationally.
And the best part about this tournament is that if he does throw down the gauntlet, no one can question him ever because of the caliber of talent that he's sharing the company with.
Right, not in this meta, not with the ADCs that he'll be going up against. Now, up next, we've got Kingzone's Prey, who's been a big part of their back-to-back LCK wins.
Now, this guy, he's been around for a very long time, but he himself is yet to secure himself an international title, but this could be his best chance. You've always got a couple of question marks because, very similarly to Worlds, he was on the team that was favorited to win the entire tournament. And while they initially looked good, things did not work out as the tournament progressed, but they've made a few changes to their roster, and their ability to play through this bot lane and just enable them is what fascinates me so much, because they don't put a huge amount of resources into him, Chad.
Yeah, and that's the big thing. It's the biggest difference about putting the resources into Prey.
Yeah, so many, if you think about top laners, you think, oh, the carry style or the tank style, and very few can kind of play both. But 80 carries, it's almost even more rare to have the guy who is resource heavy or very resource light, but still have a large output into the game. We saw during the LCK finals, Prey was actually resource heavy, and they played it well. But based on that stat, 10th in the LCK in gold percentage for his team means he's a very resource light 80 carry often, and that just kind of shows you how good he can be.
We'll see how Kingzone deals with the pressure of being the sole representative from Korea. Of course, Peanut on that team, the only defending champion here at MSI. Moving right along, though, to Fnatic's Reckless. Now, this is a guy who had a monumental performance in the ULCS finals.
And the thing is, for Reckless, is after Sven departed from Europe, it felt like that there were a few new 80 carries to come in challenging, but no one really could. And he just created such a big gap between him and the rest of the competition. You can see that he sat atop the ratings for so many different stats. This guy was so dominant in his role that for the most part of the season, this team just enabled him and he ran away with it.
And Fnatic's entire style is built around the team fight, and it's getting behind a guy like Reckless. Yes, he does have Caps as kind of that secondary threat towards the team, but really everything, all eyes are going to be on Reckless for the team's success.
And I'm really looking forward to seeing how Reckless does against this crop of 80 carries, because in the European LCS, before Sven left for North America, he was thinking there was this big rivalry between him and Sven.
Right.
But as kind of Frost mentioned, the rose in the greenhouse, he was unchallenged for a lot of the things he was doing in the European LCS. That changes at MSI here. He doesn't get a free laning phase.
Right.
All these guys are amazing in lane, and they're also equally good in team fights. So if he can excel above these guys as well, that's where he really makes the statement.
Right. How will he deal with not getting as many free advantages, let's say, as he would have domestically? Finally, we got to take a look at RNG's Uzi, looking to prove himself as the best 80 carry in the world.
And you don't have to take my word for it. Plenty of professional players, ADCs, have come out and said that Uzi is the guy to be. And if you haven't seen Uzi play, it's just because how dominating he is. He can test you for every single CS. He loves to build up those gold leads. Highest gold lead at 15 of any of ADCs in the position. And he is just a monster in the bot lane.
And I just love watching this guy play team fights. His positioning and decision making is just unquestionable. And he is just so amazing to watch. Like, his talents just feel unrivaled.
Yeah, and there's not a coincidence that these 4 amazing 80 carries are on the 4 teams that won their region. 80 carry is so important in the current game right now. There's a lot of items that can enhance the 80 carry, like the Zeeks. There's some incredibly strong 80 carries in the meta. Supports are super strong, so the success of bot lane is important. So the best 80 carries tend to win. So that role, I think, is the most important role at the tournament.
And it makes it all that much more interesting that none of those 4 80 carries have ever been to MSI before, so they have not dealt with the pressure of this international tournament. We'll get our first look at these 80 carries in just a few minutes, though, as Reckless and Fnatic face off against Uzi's RNG. After that, we'll have a clash between two of our play-in teams, Flash Wolves and EVOS, before Kingzone step on stage for their game against Team Liquid.
I personally am really looking forward to that final game of the day, RNG versus Kingzone. Many analysts off the bat are saying that it will be the LPL that will be able to rival LCK, and I want to see how well they will stack against each
jumping
other.
5 hours ahead. Yeah, come on, man. We got a lot of exciting games before that.
That's what I'm most excited for. There's a lot of build-up before that, all right?
3 hours ahead or 4 hours ahead, because game 4 and 5 to me are super intriguing. A lot of times you see, hey, the EU and NALCS were preceded into group stage. Does that mean they're stronger than the two teams that made it out of play-in? Not necessarily. So the West, so to speak, has some proving to do in those two games.
All right, well, there you have it. First up, Fnatic will get their chance for revenge as they face off against the team that ended their world's run in RNG.
Yeah, it was a tough loss when they ran into each other into the quarterfinals, but ultimately Fnatic get to look for redemption here, and RNG also get to look for a bit of redemption. Yes, they came into MSI in 2016. That was the era, the rise of RNG, but since then, they've had their worlds run, but they haven't gotten another shot at an MSI title.
Yeah, and now this time it is RNG playing on Fnatic's home turf. Last time around, they did say that it was quite daunting playing in such a huge crowd, and while the atmosphere might be slightly different with not many thousands of fans cheering in front of your face, you can feel the pressure will definitely be on RNG, as Fnatic will be in their studio playing on their home turf.
Well, we talk about the importance of AD carries in this meta and in this tournament. How do these two teams differ in the way that they play around these ADCs? Where will they look to get them advantages and ultimately allow them to carry them through to a victory?
Yeah, so a lot of times when I watched Fnatic play in the European LCS, they would sometimes pick disadvantaged lanes because they were so confident in their ability to reach team fights. I don't necessarily think that can work against RNG, because when I look at Uzi and Xiaohu, their opponents actually average very low CS against them compared to everyone else in the tournament. So those two laners, Xiaohu and Uzi, are great at denying enemies CS, which means they're very aggressive at contesting in lanes. So Fnatic will have to pick a little bit more up-tempo, at least in the lane.
Frost?
I would never debate that type of point. I do agree. I think Fnatic do need to speed it up. We saw it a little bit in their Vitality series, when Broxah went towards the Nidalee pick. But ultimately, I do think that there's also a lot of hubris to RNG, where they also try to take unfavorable matchups. The Kog'Maw and the Rakan lane comes to mind. And I don't necessarily think that Fnatic playing a slower pace game in terms of starting from draft will be heavily punished if RNG decide to fumble draft phase.
I mean, I know we've seen a lot of Fnatic playing slower games during the regular season, but I feel that coming into this tournament, they're going to up the tempo just a little bit.
So.
When you compare the two junglers, I feel like MLXG is a bit of a wild card, and you have to be able to match the unpredictability that he always brings to a game. And I feel like Broxah has a good awareness of what to do during the laning phase to play towards his bottom lane, enable them, and really set up Reckless to be the big carry of this game.
See, for me, though, that's the big breaking point in this matchup. It's Broxah versus MLXG, because ultimately, we say Fnatic, they're a team-fighting team. Well, guess what? RNG come from the region of team fighters. They faced 100 Fnatics. EDG and Fnatic, I feel, are fairly similar, and RNG took them down quite handily in the finals. But Fnatic don't have any experience with a jungler like MLXG.
A few minutes ahead of game time, I'm going to give you guys the chance to steal the spotlight here every once in a while with our predictions. Of course, Frost and Jat will be on the desk with us throughout the tournament. Vedius, our guest here on day one. Very surprisingly, I might say, 2 votes for Fnatic here.
What are you
against
doing,
Royal
Benny?
Never
What
Give
are you
Up.
doing,
Pandering to the EU crowd.
Of course I am. This is
Classic
my
EU
region.
analyst.
We've never seen either of these teams play. This is like my only chance to confidently go in and say that Fnatic's going to win.
Explain yourselves.
So I feel,
Yes, please.
I feel, right, there are 2 things that I think will give Fnatic the big edge in this matchup. Number one, I think Broxah is a more consistent and stable jungler, and MLXG, who is super gank heavy.
But did you watch his playoffs? MLXG is on fire. He's in his best
ain't
form.
the LPL playoffs.
This is the LPL playoffs. And I feel like that when I watch MLXG, he reminds me a lot of Gilius and the amount of playstyle that he has.
You did not.
Yes, I did. Right? And I feel like Fnatic are going to look to be able to control it. The second main point is when I watch Xiaohu, he is super aggressive in lane. He tries really hard to win it. And I just have that much confidence in Caps that he will be able to manage Xiaohu and he will be able to win that lane.
You mean the guy that solo dies in like pretty much every single game? Yes, Caps can go off. He can be a rocket shooting from the hip, but he ultimately it's a double-edged sword. He can also cost you a game.
Jad, I'll give you the final word here.
All right. I think the first game of a tournament is always pretty volatile.
Okay.
Fnatic has been here. This is their home turf. These teams have not scrimmed each other. RNG got here 23 and a half hours ago, played a few scrims last night, and then came to the studio today. If there was a time for Fnatic to take down RNG, it's before they found out the tournament meta. It's before. Fnatic's been scrimming with a lot of teams that have been in MSI, that have been playing competitive games on 8.8. I don't think the same is true for RNG, so I think RNG will probably end higher than Fnatic, but here I think Fnatic can steal one.
There you have it. Predictions for the first 3 games of the day. We'll get the other 3 later on. We'll soon find out which predictions will come true. For now, it's time to head down to the casters to kick off today's games. Enjoy.
Thank you very much, Dash, and hello, everybody. Welcome to Berlin, and starting on the blue side, we have the EU LCS champions, Fnatic. In the top lane, Bwipo. Jungle, Broxah. Mid lane, Caps. AD carry, Reckless. Support, Hillisang. Coach Dylan Falco. And substitute top laner, Soaz. Their opponents from the LPL, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome RNG. In the top lane, let me. In the jungle, MLXG. In the mid lane, Xiaohu. ADC, Uzi. Support, Ming. And their coach, Hart. Substitute jungler, Karsa. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for the opening group stage game, Fnatic versus RNG. Thank you very much and welcome. I'm Trevor Quickshow Henry, joined at the caster desk by Isaac Azel, Cummings Bentley, and Martin DeFischolung. And gentlemen, we have to say it, we're just all so excited to start MSI, are we not?
Of course we are excited. Now we've all said it, we don't need to say excited anymore. I just wanted to see this game now.
The problem is the anticipation is what's killing me. What level are we going to see from all of the teams? We get to cast the first 3 games together. We get to actually see them face off against one another on 8.8.
Yeah, and I mean, these first games can be so incredibly important because everyone has Kingzone as this heavy favorite, but then it seems like much more of a mix of teams that could be finishing in those higher spots and fighting against them. And we have to see, is it Fnatic that is going to be kind of rising to the top, or is it RNG?
Yeah, we also always see a lot of interesting pick and ban phase on day 1. A lot of changes suddenly for day 2 and day 3. And the team has kind of figured out from the start what the correct champions to play are. They always get an early advantage. And we have to see with Fnatic and all the time they've been practicing now on patch 8.8 against some of the teams here at MSI if they can actually get an advantage.
I think it's so important you mentioned that. Day 1, day 2, day 3. There's no week 2. There's no
it's just
real time to digest 5 group stage days in a row, 6 games per day, and each team has no wiggle room, no room for error. So what are you expecting to see now coming straight out the gates?
I mean, I think there's going to be a very high priority on getting these winning bottom lanes. The people are playing so heavily around the bottom side of the map. I don't think we're going to see a lot of Kai'Sa picks, but we're going to see a lot of Kai'Sa bans. And I do think that we're going to see probably a lot of priority on winning lanes, on pushing lanes, because that seems to be where most of these teams kind of are focused.
Yeah, and we're heading into a tournament where we're going to get a lot of flex picks. Suddenly, you know, top lane, you can get things like Swain and Ryze and Vladimir. They can also all go to the mid lane, just to mention those ones specifically, and also down that support role. I feel like almost everything is viable right now. You can play these ranged supports, the squishy ones, that you can try and counter them with hard engaged supports, and we're going to see a lot of different things, and it comes down to execution all of a sudden.
Well, execution is one thing, and that's something we'll have to see how the teams, how they perform today. Players are just about ready for picks and bans. Let's actually go on record now. Let's look into the crystal ball. We've seen a bunch of play-in games. We've seen 8.8 over the last 2 weeks. Azael, where do you think they should start? You've already mentioned the Kai'Sa. Let's move into the slightly more specific Fnatic and RNG type picks. What would you anticipate?
I mean, it's really hard to say exactly what kind of a style they're going to be playing. I do think that, you know, jungle is going to be fairly high priority as well. There's been a really huge focus on Trundle. And one of the things that's going to be interesting to me is Trundle is so big. Are people going to be practicing picks that actually are strong into the Trundle? We saw in play-ins, Graves can work quite well into it. You know, as far as solo queue picks, Nidalee is considered very strong in the Trundle. So I'm going to be very excited to see kind of how the jungle meta is changing.
Yeah, and I also want to see if we just get a bunch of tanks up in the top lane, or if we have teams trying to run these mages or some other carries, try and counter